Our cab cam series brings us back to Darke County on a follow-up of a spring cab cam we did. We're at the farm with Aaron Overholser, and Aaron, we're looking at a population study that you're doing in connection with Sam Custer, who's the extension educator. Our cab cam series is brought to you by Precision Agri Services Incorporated. Precision Agri Services is a dealer for Agro Eco Power, which is an ECM company that provides more power and less fuel for your tractor. Visit them at precisionagriservices.com. So, Aaron, let's talk a little bit about this soybean population trial that you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, so right now we're harvesting a pass here of the low population soybeans. These are the lowest ones we planted. So we got a test here with the goal was 40,000. We ended up a little higher than that because we couldn't get quite that low with our planter, but we got a good test here. So we're going to find out what they make.
So the first thing I got to ask you is about the boss sitting next to you
right
in the
here.
buddy seat.
Yep.
So that's your son,
this is
Brody.
Brody, can you say hi? Hi. Tell them how old you are, Brody. 4. Hey, sit up. They want to see you. Brody's 4. He's pretty excited to be here.
So the test. So you guys went from 180,000 clear down to a goal of 40, but you were at basically high 50s.
That's right.
Throughout the growing season, could you see any difference at all in the passes, or did they all look the same?
It was pretty amazing this year to look at it. Right at first, when the beans were small, you could tell the thin ones, you could pick them out. But once we got to the point where the beans had gotten close to canopy, it was hard to tell, honestly. And when we've done this in years past, we've noticed more of a height difference where they're thicker, they're taller. But this year, that wasn't even as noticeable. So, they've looked really good all season.
So you had a pretty tough growing season early on. I know when I was here, it was cold and windy. Today, it's nice and warm, and it's windy, so I'm sitting in the truck to stay out of the dust.
That's right,
But shortly after planting, I think you had some 28-degree temperatures, correct?
Yeah, it got really cold here this spring, and we had a couple large rain events, but we still had really good emergence. It was pretty amazing. The soybeans really came through this year. We actually had at one point a frost that froze off the first field of corn that I planted this year. So it was tough, but they came through and they've looked really good all along.
So you've made a pass on the 80.
Yeah. So I'll let me flip this around here. I can show you. So this was the 80. Or I'm sorry, this right here is the low population test we just did. So 64 is what I had it at.
So the rest of the field where you opened up, is that yield?
About what so the field average, that pass was about right on with field average. It looks like it's about 65, and that was doing some edges. I suspect the field will be mid to upper 60s. So that pass hung right in there. It looked really good.
So with this research that you're doing with Sam Custer, and I'm going to follow up with Sam once you get this entire plot harvested and he crunches the data, and we'll jump over to Sam and kind of go through that. You've been doing this several years. Have you lowered your population when it comes to soybeans?
We have. We've been steadily lowering it, and I think we're going to look at lower next year yet. So, we were a little hesitant last year in 2019 because here we were so late to plant, and so we actually bumped it back up in 2019 because we wanted to be sure that our beans would canopy and that we'd get that weed control. But yeah, for 2020, we were back on track, and I think that's something that I think most farmers are going to continue to do in the future.
So what's going to be your sweet spot population for you in Darke County next year if you had to venture a guess now?
I'm thinking 140 to 150. It's one of those things where we gotta work for the tough spots. Like this field is pretty nice and flat, and it's easy to get the beans to grow here. But we've got some where you know, it's up a hill and back down a hill, and we got to make sure we get canopy if nothing else for weed control. But yeah, I think that 150 mark would be good for most of our farms.
Well, Aaron, I appreciate you spending a little time with me, and thanks to Brody for overseeing this entire operation. And good luck with the rest of the harvest. And we're gonna jump over and visit with Sam and look at the numbers that have come out of this plot.
All right, thanks, Bart.
So as promised, joining me is Sam Custer. So Sam is the extension educator that Aaron's working with. And Sam, you've had time to crunch all the data on this plot. You know, let's kind of get down to business. You really saw no yield difference in all of the different treatments from 180 clear down to 60,000 is basically what you got planted, correct?
Right. So yes. Can I share my screen? You okay with that?
Absolutely. Shows the data.
So as we were in the past at some higher populations, we didn't see a significant difference. But let me tell you why we're doing what we're doing, because people think I'm crazy out here in Western Ohio looking at these low populations. So we're really trying to determine how low a population we can plant and not have a yield drag. And the big piece here is to determine at what point in time do we need to replant or go in and interseed when we have poor emergence. So we were shooting for treatments of 40,000, 80,000, 120, and 160. You can see at the bottom of this slide, we ended up at 63, 75, 116, and 155 for our populations. And
you ended up at 63 because Aaron had a Kinsey planter. You just couldn't get it to drop any less than that, could you?
No, we played with it. It was cold, really cold that day when we were planting. If you noted on the slide, it was cold, and we were changing out sprockets, letting air out of drive wheels, all kinds of things to try to get this population down to 40. We couldn't get there this year. We'll get there next year if we have to walk it on with a horse and buggy.
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting, that even with these lower populations, and I always say, you know, God seems to smile a little brighter on Darke County, but these beans went through some stress. I mean, at the top of your slide, it was 28 degrees that morning when you planted. So these were not in a poor condition, but these beans were not planted in ideal conditions either by any means.
No, it was cold. We had been cold. And as many of you remember, the month of May was cold. But what we did find is, and you can see on those populations, our emergence was really, really strong, and across this field, really nice, even stand. And some of my biggest concerns, Bart, is we crank these numbers down is weed pressure. But we had little to no weed pressure in this field whatsoever.
Well, and that's, if you want to go to your next slide, when the video with Aaron, that there was zero weed pressure, and he, same treatment clear across the field from a weed control standpoint. So even those lower numbers, you were able to achieve decent yield or decent weed control. All right, so here you're showing us the randomized of the blocks, correct?
Yes. So we use a randomized procedure, and I've already sorted this down by treatments, but you can see the order that we did these in on the numbers over here, 101 through 304. But if you see our three lowest treatments here, what we attempted to plant, what our stand count in those treatments was, come all the way over to the meat of this. Our yields in each one of these treatments are in this dry yield per acre average. And then this column third from the right is our average on each one of those. So you can see across the four treatments, an average of 66.5, 66.8, 65.4, and 67.5 in these treatments. Now, many of us have agronomic specialties as educators across the state, but a lot of us really also bring in that farm management perspective. So we want to see a return on investment, and this is where it's really important for a grower to take a look at this. So Bart, when we added the 40,000 seeds per acre, that cost us $13.78 an acre. So we lost money there. As we added another 40,000, that was almost a $44 loss for us. And when we went to 160, that cost us $39 an acre out there. So
I joked with you, Sam. So you're going to recommend everyone plants 40,000, wow, 60,000 next year with your numbers, right?
Well, we're really only recommending that for those guys up there in Delaware County, right outside of Powell, Ohio. But here in Western Ohio, my guys in Darke County, guys and ladies, we're not ready to go there yet. We still think that sweet spot's maybe 130 to be comfortable with some of those tough years. We get that inch of rain right after we pull out of the field, and it's hard to get those beans up out of the ground. But I would tell you, Bart, if you had to go out and you ended up with 50 or 60,000 plants after a tough emergence, there's no reason in the world, if that's a pretty even stand, to go out there and replant.
And that may be the real value of this research, that is, as guys are dropping the population number, to your point, in a replant situation, maybe just leaving it's the most economical alternative.
And Bart, I would tell you that is, if I only saw these numbers, if this is the first time I ever saw this, I would say, I'm not ready to go there yet. But we've looked at numbers in this 80 and 60 range here in Western Ohio before. Eric Rieker pushed those 40 and 50,000 numbers this year up in Fulton County and saw similar results. So we're fairly confident on a replant situation. Don't tear it up at 50, 55,000.
All right, let's jump to your last slide, which is kind of the take home. Oh no, you've got the yield map where you've got a little issue in the field, but the randomized pattern kind of accounts for that.
Right. So when we do this statistically, that gives us a little bit better picture. So if you want to do some of this research at home, we've got a nice app that Food, Agriculture, and Biological Engineering put together. So it randomizes things, takes into account the variability. So we know that Overholser Farms has got a spot out here in this field they need to take a look at for future purposes. This first year farming this farm for them, so a good identifier. We need to use the technology we have available. So here again, this is this app that does all the stats for us. I took stats with Dr. McCracken back in about 1984, so I was really happy to get an app to do this for me at this point in time. So as we start looking at the numbers, this is what our populations, when we statistically look at them, we have that difference there, and you can see the numbers. But this is the real meat and potatoes. As we put in the information, you can see our yields at 120,000, 160, 40, and 80. And there's no statistical difference in those yields whatsoever. And you can see that when you look at them here. We're only a bushel or two difference in any of those. So there's no statistical difference whatsoever in them. We did see some statistical difference, although very minute, just a 0.1% on moisture out here. So this falls in line with what we've been talking about today, that soybeans are just hugely adaptive and can figure out a way to produce those yields we're looking at.
And again, to reiterate, this study, this is the year 3 that you've done. And you can go and turn your screen off for me. This is the 3rd year you've done this study, working with Aaron, correct?
Yes. So we've worked with Aaron over a 3-year period of time, maybe 4. We didn't do it last year just because of that crazy year. He didn't get in and start planting soybeans until June, and working with his father, there was no way that he was going to let us kind of play around with this in June after that tough May that we had. So we skipped last year.
So, and all of this, and I've got my eFields report book from last year. So there's all kinds of data and all kinds of research that's happening across the state on farms like Aaron's, that the extension educators are working with farms on full farm size research, and not just little 15 by 20 foot plots. When will the 2020 book be out?
So the 2020 books will be out the second Wednesday in January. So we'll be pulling all the data together, sending that data to Elizabeth Hawkins. She has a team of people, mostly just her, synthesizing that data. We'll proof those books about the third Monday in December and send them to the publisher. Lots of good information. There's a possibility of over 200 research reports in that this year, Bart. So we continue to grow those numbers, work with farmers that have questions, and that's kind of the best piece of the eFields. You as a farmer, our growers, and your listeners can go to an extension educator and say, I've got a question about this. We can work with them and get that information figured out. And then we can share that across the state, because we all are in this together and want to work towards improving this across the state of Ohio. And
I personally have looked at some of these studies and are doing a few things on my farm. I've got some population studies on some soybeans that I've did, some starter study on corn. So I encourage anyone, if you're interested, there's great research in these reports. They are online, but I prefer the hard copy that I can pick up at my extension office. So Sam, I appreciate you joining us. Appreciate sharing what you're learning out in Darke County, and look forward to the report coming out in January. Our Fall Cab Cam series is brought to you by Precision Agri Services Incorporated. Visit them at precisionagriservices.com.